The English Podcast by Explicit. Hello, my name is Lawrence, and welcome to the first podcast of this new season, Fly on the Wall, in which we give a voice to our colleagues around the world who watch and comment on subjects of interest and importance in the news. Today, what's in a kiss given without consent? In Sydney, Australia, in August this year, an historic World Cup victory by the Spanish women's soccer team over England was completely overshadowed by the behaviour of Luis Rubiales, president of the Spanish Football Federation, when, during the medal ceremony, he grabbed striker Jenny Hermoso's head in both hands and kissed her on the mouth. So was it a regrettable, overly exuberant display of joy, or a highly charged political red line that has been crossed once too often? What's the story? Why it matters and what should happen next is the subject of our first Fly on the Wall podcast of the new season, in the company today of our politically savvy colleague, Emma, who's going to talk about what's in a kiss given without consent. Look out in particular for the following words: consent, solidarity, entitled, and the phrase standing together. So, Emma, what's all the fuss about?
So a few weeks ago, just after the final match for the Women's Football World Cup, the president of the Spanish Federation kissed one of the players on the lips, very clearly without her consent. And out of solidarity, all the women on the team decided to go on strike to protest, because nothing was happening and he wasn't apologising, and there seemed to not be a problem, according to the men. So it was a really important act of solidarity between the women, them all going on strike and having just won the World Cup meant the situation couldn't just stay as it was, and he was forced to resign.
And so why does it matter?
It's an example of how men feel entitled to treat women's bodies, and it matters because women have stopped accepting it and have spoken up for years now against this male domination of their bodies and control by men. And yet, despite the Me Too movement and despite so many women speaking up, men still feel allowed to kiss women without their consent and to use their bodies publicly. So if that can happen publicly, what can still happen when nobody's looking and when somebody isn't in a position of power like she was?
So, Emma, what do you think should happen next? What would you like to happen next?
I think it's fundamental that he had to resign, and I think it's a real shame that his apology wasn't an apology. And when he announced that he was resigning, he was not saying he regretted anything. He was saying he was sad that he has to resign because of the pressure. So there's no questioning on his behalf of why all these women are prepared to go on strike. And there's no questioning of his gestures. So I think it's a shame that he hasn't understood what's going on. But I think what should happen and should keep happening is women standing together and the solidarity, and that's how we make things change.
Thank you, Emma, for giving us such a clear and unambivalent take on recent events in women's football. Let's listen again to the four expressions for today. Consent.
The president of the Spanish Federation kissed one of the players on the lips, very clearly without her consent.
Solidarity.
So it was a really important act of solidarity between the women, them all going on strike.
Entitled.
It's an example of how men feel entitled to treat women's bodies.
And the phrase standing together.
I think what should happen and should keep happening is women standing together.
That brings us to the end of our first podcast of the season. If you'd like to comment or give your opinion on this subject or any of the subjects in this new season, please do so wherever you downloaded this podcast or on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from you. Tune in again in 2 weeks to hear all about why we should sit down for almost 2 hours to watch a rugby match instead of going off to do something else far more interesting and useful instead. Whether you like rugby or not, we promise you some fascinating insights from our colleague Kevin, who is a fervent supporter of the current Rugby World Cup title holders, South Africa, who are looking to be the first team to win the competition for the 4th time. Yes, but before that, we'll almost certainly have to face off against formidable France, the hosts of the competition, and perhaps in many ways hot favourites as they play on home ground. And certainly one of the most exciting teams to watch. Thanks for listening, and bye for now.